My parents told me to never come back. After I paid $20,000 to save their home, I lay sprawled on the small sofa in my newly rented apartment on the east side of Brookhaven, one hand holding a cup of hot tea, the other pressed against my forehead as if trying to chase away the dizziness from the flood of incoming messages. The phone screen kept lighting up on the coffee table, calls from Mom, Dad, and Ryan, my older brother. Those three names flashed again and again, like an endless loop, as if one more second of silence would make the phone explode from overload. 6 months. 6 months since the day I left that house. No arguments, no tears, not even the definitive slam of a door. I quietly packed a few clothes, my old laptop, and a worn-out financial ledger into a faded canvas bag, then stepped out just as the sun set behind the buildings across the street. No one stopped me, no one asked where I was going, and no one imagined that I wouldn't be coming back. They were used to Emily, the agreeable daughter, the one who always stepped up to pay the bills when the family was strapped for cash. I had been the invisible fixer of every financial mess, always appearing whenever Ryan lost a job or when Mom and Dad forgot to pay for new furniture. I used to think that was strength, that it was the right thing to do, that it was my duty. But now, in this tiny apartment that could barely fit one person and the silence, I finally understood. For nearly a decade, I had been sustaining a system I never created, a relentless machine where I was the only one endlessly running. The phone buzzed again. I didn't even need to look to know it was Mom. In my head, I could already hear her familiar message. How could you do this to the family? If you still care at all, call back immediately. I didn't pick up. I didn't even reach for the phone. I just leaned my head back, took a deep breath, and felt my chest grow lighter with each passing second. My name is Emily Carter, 28 years old, financial analyst, full scholarship graduate of Riverdale University. I once believed that if I worked hard, stayed out of trouble, and always humbled myself, sooner or later I would be recognized. But reality turned out differently. The harder I tried, the more invisible I became. And the one time I finally stopped, the phone rang like a fire alarm. Ryan, 32, dropped out after 2 years of art school, had worked as a barista, a delivery guy, and then ended up unemployed again. Yet in my parents' eyes, he was the one with potential, the dreamer deserving of a hug every time he failed. Dad defended him like a warrior returning from battle. As for me, the one who never left a debt unpaid, never messed up a plan, never asked for anything, I was labeled the ungrateful child. I remember the day I left as clearly as if it happened yesterday. Mom was engrossed in her favorite TV show, Dad was buried in a car insurance spreadsheet, and Ryan was sprawled on the couch, gaming. I walked right past them with my bag. No one looked up. No one wondered why I wasn't dressed for work like usual. No one asked, "Where are you going?" Yet now, after 6 months of silence, they were calling me nonstop, as if I were the lifeline they had carelessly tossed away and were now desperately trying to retrieve. I glanced at the phone, still buzzing violently. I didn't power it off. I just let it ring. Each vibration was like proof that I had finally severed the invisible cord that had bound me for a decade. For the first time in my life, freedom smelled like a quiet afternoon, where every sound belonged to me and me alone. I started working part-time at 16, not to buy cute clothes or hang out at cafes like my peers, but because I knew if I didn't take care of myself, no one else would. While friends were picked up by parents in nice cars, I pedaled 4 blocks to work at a bakery, wiping tables, scrubbing floors, then pedaled back home when the sky was already dark. I used my very first paycheck to buy a second-hand computer, the only thing that helped me keep up with schoolwork. No one asked if I needed help. No one asked if I had enough sleep or if I had eaten dinner. But when Ryan needed a new laptop, despite having dropped out, Mom readily opened a credit card to buy him a brand new MacBook, just to say, he needs a fresh start. I had long gotten used to that reversed logic. When I did things right, it was expected. When Ryan messed up, it was because he was trying. Ryan was 4 years older than me, but if you looked at how things worked in our house, you would think I was the older sibling. He always had an excuse for every failure, always received understanding. When he quit the bookstore because the boss was too controlling, Mom immediately defended him. No one can survive in a toxic environment. When he wrecked the car Dad had just fixed, the first thing Dad said was, "Accidents happen to everyone." I once received a full scholarship from Riverdale University, thinking my family would be proud. But the only reaction from my mother was, "Why didn't you pick a school closer to home so Ryan could still use the car?" The day I got accepted into the largest investment consulting firm in the region, Mom just sighed. "It's so far away. Who's going to take us to our doctor appointments now? I can't even remember the last time they said they were proud of me. Maybe they never did. I used to believe that if I just kept trying, diligently proving my worth, one day they would recognize it. But the more I did, the more I became a walking wallet. They needed the house repainted. I was called to chip in some money. Ryan wanted to enroll in an online art course. I was asked, "Can you advance the money for your brother? We'll pay you back later." At first, I thought it was just temporary hardship, so I was happy to help. But a little gradually turned into covering everything: electric bills, washing machine repairs, gas money for Dad's car. I sent money regularly, without a single thank you, only more requests. "This month's a bit tight. Could you send a little extra?" I kept telling myself that family is about helping each other. But then, after weeks of stress at work, every time I returned home, it was always the same scene. Ryan lying on the couch, legs propped up on the table, tapping away on his game console. Mom bustling in the kitchen, cooking his favorite dishes, while Dad kept retelling the proud story of how Ryan won a drawing contest back in 5th grade. I am not an unfeeling person. I used to care about every little detail. But there's one thing I could no longer continue doing: living a life where effort was overlooked and failure was celebrated like a grand achievement. I remember clearly when I told Mom I was saving up to buy my first apartment. She just chuckled dryly and said, "If a girl buys a house on her own, people will think she's unmarriageable." I stayed silent, but that was the moment I realized I would never truly earn their recognition, not because I wasn't good enough, but because, in their eyes, Ryan would always be the #1 priority. And I was just the backup plan whenever everything fell apart. That truth, as bitter as it was, made me stronger. 6 months ago, when I left that house, I didn't cry, didn't get angry, didn't lay blame. I just quietly walked away, like the only person who realized that if I didn't save myself, I would forever be the one keeping balance for a world that was permanently tilted towards someone else. It all started with a simple text from Mom late one night while I was still at the office. "Emily, the power got cut off. Dad forgot to pay the bill this month. Can you transfer the money? I'll pay you back tomorrow." Without thinking much, that same night, I sent $1,260, along with a gentle reminder, "Please remind Dad to pay earlier next time." Of course, I never saw that money again. Then came the water bill, gas stove repairs, supplements for Dad. Each request was wrapped in such reasonable excuses that refusing them would have seemed cruel. At first, I reassured myself, "It's okay, I'm earning decently." But eventually, what began as occasional help turned into me shouldering the living expenses of a 4-person household, 2 with odd jobs and 1 gaming all day. One month, just as I was preparing to submit a mortgage application for my dream apartment, Dad called me. His voice was hoarse, sounding embarrassed yet firm. "Emily, the bank is threatening to foreclose on the house. If we can't come up with the money in a few weeks, it'll be bad." I froze. That house, though old and worn, was where I grew up, where I had once dreamed of having a small space to work, a dream that was later replaced by a sofa bed to make room for Ryan to temporarily move back in. I softly asked, "How much do you need?" Dad quickly replied, "About $980 a month, just for a few months, until we stabilize." And I agreed. That night, I canceled the down payment for the apartment I had long dreamed of, sending off the first rescue payment. But a few months quickly turned into nearly 2 years. 2 years, over $20,000, not including car insurance, roof repairs, or Ryan's birthday celebrations. What angered me the most wasn't the money. It was the attitude. Not a single word of thanks. No one asked if I could afford it. Only more requests, more pressure. I became a human ATM with no right to say no in the very house I was keeping from being taken by the bank. Meanwhile, Ryan remained blissfully unemployed. Whenever I confronted them, Mom would just softly say, "He's trying to find his path. Don't pressure him." The pressure wasn't placed on Ryan, the one who spent his days playing video games. The pressure was placed on me, the one working nearly 60 hours a week to cover his share, and yet now I was being labeled as the one causing pressure. I quietly kept track of every amount, every transfer date, as if maintaining a ledger for a client who would never repay their debts. I never intended to ask for it back because deep down, I knew I would never see a penny returned. Every time I thought about cutting ties, another message would come in. "Dad's back hurts badly. Can you order some medicine? The roof's been leaking all week. No one has money to fix it." And almost like a reflex, I would open my wallet again, pushing aside every personal plan. I gradually grew fearful of opening my banking app every morning. Just seeing the dwindling balance was enough to leave me gasping for air. My life was completely governed by other people's bills, by endless needs from those who had never once stood on their own 2 feet. I was crammed into a tiny apartment in Brookhaven, living off instant noodles for weeks to save every dollar I could to send home. To fix the bedroom door Ryan had turned into his creative art studio. Then one day, in a convenience store, I opened my wallet to buy a bottle of milk and realized I didn't even have enough. In that moment, I truly felt it. I had been drained completely. I used to think being strong meant carrying everything on my back, but it turns out, real strength is knowing when to let go of the swamp called hoping they'll change. That Sunday afternoon, it started to drizzle. After a grueling weekend shift, all I wanted was a hot shower and a warm blanket. But instead, I swung by the supermarket, bought several bags of groceries, salmon, vegetables, frozen foods, and drove nearly 40 minutes to my parents' house, just as I had done for the past 2 years. I was carrying the bags into the kitchen, hadn't even set them down yet, when Mom stepped in front of me, arms crossed, her voice hard as stone. "We need to talk." Before I could even exhale, she fired off. "We've made it clear. The money you send each month is no longer enough." I stood frozen. "Not enough? What do you mean?" Dad stepped out from the living room, his voice deep and heavy as if he were reading out a guilty verdict. "You're earning good money, living alone. Meanwhile, the family's struggling more and more. Don't you think that's unfair?" I stared straight at the 2 people who had brought me into this world, now trying to turn their comfort into my obligation. I kept my voice calm. I've paid for the house for 2 years, not to mention utilities, medications, roof repairs, and that's still not enough? From the sofa, Ryan lazily lifted his head from his game screen, smirking. It's not like you're starving or anything. What's the big deal about sharing a bit? I turned fully toward him, my voice colder than the rain outside. Sharing is a two-way street, Ryan. You only know how to take. Mom immediately snapped. That's enough, Emily. Don't you dare speak so disrespectfully. I took a deep breath, my chest threatening to burst. Disrespectful? For telling the truth? Mom's face hardened, her lips pressing into a thin line I had known since childhood. The expression she wore whenever she wanted to impose her will through manufactured outrage. If this is so burdensome for you, she said coldly, each word cutting like a blade, then you can walk out of this house, and don't ever come back. Time seemed to freeze. If she knew how many years that sentence had echoed in my head, maybe she wouldn't have said it so easily. But this time, no one tried to stop me. No one called me the good daughter, the silent sacrificer. No one reached out a hand. They just stood there, waiting to see if I had the guts to walk away. I placed the grocery bags on the table, didn't bother unpacking them or putting anything in the fridge like I usually did. All right, I said, my voice light as the wind but sharp as steel. I understand. I'll go. I turned and walked toward the door, each step heavy but steady. No one followed. No one called my name. Only Ryan's lazy mumbling behind me, something like, such a drama queen. I walked out of that house empty-handed, heart hollow but spine straight. The cold rain soaked my hair and clothes, but for the first time, I felt lighter, as if the chains I had carried for so many years had finally fallen away. I didn't drive straight back to my tiny apartment. I stopped at an empty gas station and sat silently in my car. I opened my contacts list, staring at the names, Mom, Dad, Ryan. Calmly, I blocked them, one by one. In that exact moment, I didn't know what would come next. I couldn't imagine the storm that would rage when they realized the family ATM had shut down. But there was one thing I knew with absolute certainty. I had chosen my own path. The family ATM had gone silent, and I knew, this time, I wasn't going back. Not out of pride, but because I had finally understood. Kindness isn't infinite, and blind sacrifice only teaches others to see you as their responsibility. My new apartment was on the 3rd floor of an old building in Midtown Brookhaven, with peeling white paint and hallways that always smelled faintly of rotting wood. But to me, it was paradise. No one woke me up at 6 a.m. to book doctor's appointments. No more midnight texts asking if I could advance some gas money. No more racing across 3 counties with bags of groceries for dinners no one even touched. I had moved here with just 2 suitcases of old clothes and a thin, worn-out blanket. But the lightness I felt was more precious than any luxury. Every morning, I woke to the sound of my alarm, brewed a cup of coffee, and opened the window to let sunlight flood the room. No blaring TV from the living room. No Mom's constant complaints. No Dad's persistent coughing when I came home late. On weekends, I leisurely read books, took online courses to learn new skills, or strolled through Willow Park. I no longer clung to my phone, waiting for fake emergencies that always ended with me reaching for my wallet. I cut off all financial ties completely. No transfers, no bill payments, no medicine deliveries, no food drop-offs. Gradually, my bank account began to stabilize. For the first time in years, I started to save. Something that once seemed like an impossible dream. But that peace lasted only 3 months. One afternoon, I received a text from Mom. "Emily, the bank just sent a warning letter. Your dad is in trouble. Call me back." I read it, put the phone down, and didn't reply. Not because I was cold, but because I knew that trouble had never been about health or safety. It was always about money. Sure enough, a few days later, Dad called. "We need to have a serious talk. The housing issue can't be delayed any longer." I didn't pick up. They called every day. At first, their voices were gentle, then pleading, finally accusatory. Mom texted, "Are you really going to abandon your parents?" Ryan left a voice message. "You think this is a joke? Everyone's struggling, you know." I stayed silent. But the calls kept coming, day after day, as if they believed that if they harassed me long enough, I would cave. I had to change my work phone number, block several social media accounts, but I still occasionally read the long, rambling messages, full of accusations that I had changed, that I had become heartless, cold. But I knew I wasn't heartless. I was healing. One Monday afternoon, just as I stepped out of my office building, my phone lit up. Ryan's name flashed across the screen. I didn't answer. This time, the voicemail he left wasn't pleading. It was sharp and cutting like a knife. "You think you're so great, huh? Running away from your family just because your life got a little easier. If Mom and Dad lose the house, it'll be your fault." I stood frozen in the parking lot, listening to the message 3 times over. I didn't know whether to laugh or to scream. I had skipped meals, wired thousands of dollars without a single thank you. And now, all I got in return was blame. I lifted my phone and began typing a message. I carried my burden, and yours, for years. If things fall apart now, maybe it's time to ask yourselves why. But I deleted it, because I understood. No matter what I said, in their eyes, I was never truly a daughter or a sister. I was just a solution. And when the solution disappeared, all that was left was resentment. I stuffed my phone into my pocket, walking along the sidewalk bathed in golden sunset light, feeling a bit lighter inside. That night, after a late meeting, I received another message from Dad. "Emily, why haven't you paid the house installment this month? The bank is pressing us." I froze in the hallway of my office, not out of shock, but because of the icy dread that ran down my spine. I hadn't sent a single payment in almost 6 months, and yet he wrote as if me continuing to pay was the natural order of things. What unsettled me most wasn't the message itself. It was the way he phrased it. "The bank is pressuring us." I bit my lip. Sweat dampened my palms. My instincts told me something was seriously wrong this time. I decided not to guess anymore. That night, after brewing a cup of hot tea, I opened my laptop. I logged into the bank account I had used to make mortgage payments, the one under Dad's name. All these years, I had never checked. I trusted that the money I sent would be used for its intended purpose. After all, they were my family. I began combing through the transaction history, and what I saw made my heart stop. I once believed that because I was their daughter, I was supposed to trust them completely. That's why I never checked the money I sent for 2 whole years. But today, as I scrolled through the transaction history for the first time, my heart nearly stopped. Every transfer I had made was listed clearly, down to the last cent. But then, the last line made my blood run cold. The final mortgage payment had been made 8 months ago, right before I stopped sending money. I rubbed my eyes several times, hoping I was seeing it wrong. But no. The bank's system clearly stated, status, overdue for 8 months. Amount owed, $6,480. Condition, at risk of foreclosure. I pressed my hand over my mouth, trying to control my ragged breathing. What did this mean? I had continued sending money regularly for 3 months after the mortgage payments had stopped, which meant they had received the money, but hadn't used it to pay for the house. I opened my personal banking app. Sure enough, nearly $3,000 had disappeared afterward. They took the money, but didn't pay the mortgage and didn't offer a single word of explanation. A wave of icy cold swept down my spine. This wasn't just disappointment. This was betrayal. It was a knife stabbed straight into the naive trust I had given them. I didn't call them immediately. I needed solid proof. The next morning, I called the bank directly, introducing myself as the person who had been assisting with the family's payments. I calmly explained my concerns. After verifying the account, the customer service representative confirmed, "This account hasn't had any full mortgage payments since the beginning of the year. It's currently under special foreclosure proceedings." I thanked them and hung up. The world spun around me. There was no longer any doubt. The money I had poured in during those final months had not been used for the purpose they had begged me for. Where had the money gone? I didn't know, but it certainly hadn't gone toward saving the house. That night, I couldn't sleep. I left the lights on, lying stiff on the small sofa, staring blankly at the ceiling. One question kept echoing in my mind. How long had they been lying to me? I remembered Mom's tearful words. "It's just temporary, sweetie. Without you, we'd starve. Your father is losing sleep over this. Please help us get through it." I remembered the look Ryan gave me the day I walked out with my bag. It wasn't a look of regret. It was the look of someone afraid of losing a financial lifeline. I picked up my phone and typed a message to Dad. I just spoke to the bank. They said the mortgage has been overdue for 8 months, while I continued sending money. Where did that money go? There was no immediate reply. 15 minutes later, the phone rang. Caller ID, Dad. I didn't pick up. I sat there, listening to the cold, hollow ringing, like an echo from a world I had once blindly trusted. On the third call, at 10 o'clock that night, I finally answered. "Emily, it's Dad." His voice was low and tense, like a guitar string about to snap. "I guess you know about it now?" I stayed calm. "I didn't just hear. I confirmed it. The mortgage is 8 months overdue. I kept sending money. Where did it go?" Dad was silent for a few seconds, then sighed heavily. "I know you're angry, but it's not as simple as you think." I gave a bitter laugh, my voice sharp as ice. "Not simple? I sent money for the house. The house wasn't paid for. What part of that is complicated?" Right then, Mom grabbed the phone. "Emily, don't you dare speak to your father like that." Her voice was shrill, almost a scream. "You don't understand the situation. Since you left, everything's fallen apart." I narrowed my eyes, speaking slowly, clearly. Fallen apart? Or was it just that I stopped paying for everyone's easy life? "Don't talk like that," Mom hissed. "We did our best. Ryan lost his job. Your father's been sick. The house is falling apart. And you turned your back on us." I lowered my voice, steady and firm. "No, Mom. I turned away after you drained every last dollar from me, and still it wasn't enough." There was a dead silence on the other end of the line. Then Mom's voice returned, trembling, sobbing. The kind of cry I had grown so used to. "Emily, we're family. Family helps each other." I cut her off, for the first time in my life refusing to let emotions control me. "Help has limits, Mom. I'm not an endless money machine. And worse, the money I sent wasn't even used as promised. You lied to me." The silence dragged on so long I thought they had hung up. But then Ryan barged in, furious. "You're blowing everything out of proportion. Mom and Dad just needed a little more time. You're acting like the whole world owes you something." A dry, humorless laugh escaped me. The world owed me nothing. But that house, the house I had sacrificed everything to save, definitely did. Ryan growled. "You're so selfish. You're not the same Emily anymore," I replied, my voice colder than ice. "I used to just be a fool." Dad cut in, his voice weary, defeated. "We made mistakes, Emily, but you're all we have left. I promise I'll pay you back." I let out a hollow laugh, lifeless. "How many times have you promised that before?" A heavy, suffocating silence. Then Dad spoke, labored and low. "If you don't help, we'll lose the house. Everything will be gone." I gripped the phone tightly. My chest felt as if a boulder was crushing it. But when I opened my mouth, my voice was light as air. "Then let it be lost. It's no longer my responsibility." "Emily, you can't," Dad stammered. "Can't what?" I cut him off, my tone sharp as a blade. "Can't walk away after being pushed to the very edge?" I emphasized every word, slow and deliberate. I carried this family for almost a decade, while Ryan wasted money and criticized me. And now, just because I stopped, I'm the cold-blooded one? Mom started crying again. Ryan mumbled something to her. Dad continued pleading. But I wasn't listening anymore. Their voices were now just distant echoes from a world I had already left behind. I took a deep breath and said firmly, "I've done more than enough. I'm not helping anymore. Not because I'm cruel, but because I need to live. I'm walking away, but I'm leaving you with the most important lesson. Learn to stand on your own without clinging to anyone." I ended the call, not out of anger, but out of peace. After that final call, I turned off my phone and left it untouched on the table for 3 full days. No more messages, no more calls, no more guilt-drenched accusations hidden behind fake tears. Only silence. And I had never known silence could be so sweet. The next morning, I woke early, brewed a cup of coffee, and stepped out onto my tiny balcony. The soft golden sunlight spilled over the old rooftops of Brookhaven. The city was slowly waking in peace. My apartment was tiny, with a low ceiling and creaky wooden floors. But it was the first space that truly belonged to me. No one knocking on my door for money. No one making me feel guilty for daring to live for myself. Freedom, it turned out, wasn't loud like I had once imagined. It was gentle, light, like the first breath after surfacing from deep underwater. But even silence becomes daunting when night falls. When work was no longer enough to drown out the chaotic thoughts in my head, I began to wonder, had I gone too far? I had cut off all support. I had left the house I once fought to save teetering on the brink of foreclosure. I had left the people who had raised me to fend for themselves amid the chaos. I, who once had been their crutch, had now become the one who let go. Was I too heartless? I opened the voicemail inbox, the one I had tried to ignore all week. Messages from Mom. "You'll regret this. That house means everything to me." Messages from Dad. "We've run out of options. If you don't help." A message from Ryan, short and bitter. "All this because you're too proud. You're sinking the whole family." I listened carefully to each message, not missing a single word. But this time, I didn't cry. I just felt tired. They had always known how to sow doubt in me. For years, they had bound me not with chains, but with guilt. With lines like, "You're the pride of the family. Without you, we'd be ruined." But that pride had never been expressed with gratitude. It had only ever been used as a shield to hide their own mistakes. I remembered the sleepless nights spent balancing clients' budgets, only to be scolded by Ryan the next morning for not enjoying life. I remembered how many times I canceled the only trip I had planned all year because Mom and Dad suddenly ran out of money. I remembered the disappointed look on Mom's face every time I dared to admit I was exhausted, as if I had betrayed her trust, even though I was the only one who had never turned my back on them. I shuffled into my bedroom, sitting down on the edge of the bed, running my fingers along the frayed blanket. One familiar question kept echoing in my mind. What if they really lose the house? What if one day I get a call telling me my parents are homeless? Would I feel guilty? Maybe, because I had spent nearly a decade keeping them from collapsing. And that kind of history doesn't just disappear after 6 months of stopping. But people forget quickly, and guilt doesn't need a reason to worm its way into your heart. I sighed. Maybe I was never the perfect daughter. Maybe I had been too harsh. But if I didn't draw a line, I would have nothing left. Nothing but an empty wallet and a shattered heart. I'm not telling this story for praise. I'm not seeking anyone's approval. I just want to understand. I want to know if anyone out there has ever felt this way. Has anyone ever shouldered the burden of an entire family? Has anyone ever been labeled cold simply because they dared to say no? And if you're still reading this far, I truly want to ask, did I do the right thing? I chose to live for myself. But is there a price waiting for me somewhere in the shadows, one I haven't seen yet? I don't know. I just hope that someone out there might offer me a new perspective, a sincere message, because sometimes all a person needs to keep moving forward is to know that they are not alone. The story of Emily Carter is a wake-up call for anyone who has ever been labeled the good child and burdened with responsibilities that were never truly theirs. For years, she sacrificed her freedom and inner peace out of loyalty to a concept of family that only knew how to take, but never how to give. But when Emily realized her own worth was being eroded, she bravely said enough and stepped out of that endless cycle. Her story is not just about escape. It's a reminder that real love begins with setting clear boundaries and learning how to protect yourself. What do you think about Emily Carter's decision? Was she right to walk away from the imposed cycle of responsibility, or should she have found a way to compromise? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to follow the channel to hear more powerful stories about choice, family, and the journey to reclaim oneself.